Good evening. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'll read this disclaimer. The Sahuarita board members and the district administration are meeting at the district auditorium. There will also be accommodations for up to 200 community members to attend the meeting. The meeting will be live streamed by use of YouTube, which allows for members of the public to view and or listen to the meeting virtually. If you need accommodations, please contact Betsy Palacio at bpalacios@sahuarita.net. A link has been provided for any call to public comments. 20 minutes will be allowed for reading of online and in-person comments at the meeting. Any comment not read during the agenda item will still be entered into the public record. We'll adhere to all board meeting procedures to the extent practicable. An audio recording and or draft copy of the minutes from this meeting will be available to the public, and we apologize in advance for any unforeseen difficulties and ask your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the roll call. Ms. Palacio. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Present.
Here.
Here.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 2, the approval of the agenda as it's revised. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir. Mr. Opalka, at this time, I would recommend approval of the agenda as it was revised.
Thank you very much. I have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes, the draft minutes as revised last.
Yes, sir. President Opalka, members of the board, you have in your packet draft copies of the minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting of the board on August 11, 2021. And after your review and consideration, I do recommend approval at this time.
Thank you very much. I have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I think I got a motion.
Second.
There we go. A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to ratification of the vouchers. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, as was noted, our CFO, Mrs. Huey, is absent for this meeting, and on her behalf, I do recommend approval of the new expense vouchers number 1017 to 1022, totaling $12 million at this time.
Thank you very much. I have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The same? Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to superintendent report. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, my report this evening is actually very abbreviated. I'm just going to draw attention to the enrollment reports. And overall, I think the news is favorable, even though you see red in the lower right-hand corner to the tune of like 41 students. And that's because by this point, we've now moved into the school year beyond the 10 days. So we've been able to eliminate students that we affectionately call ghosts, students that are still on the books, but are really not there because they've moved. So we've been able to clean that up and get a little bit more of a clear picture of what our numbers look like. And the good news is that when you look at that graph right there, the second data point on the right, you see the orange was last year, and you saw that slide between the last meeting and this meeting. And this year, the slide was much less, even including cleaning out those numbers and that data and making it more reflective. And in fact, if you compare this year's number to last year's number, it's roughly about 400 students more. So from the standpoint of our operations, our budget stability, it's looking really good. I'd also just make a point a slight point, but it's still a significant point in the chart. You notice that that the number of students for SDPA, which was huge last year, of course, in the midst of the whole pandemic year, and then this year it went way down, and from last meeting to this meeting, they've increased like 18 students. And to me, intuitively, from one person's opinion, it seems like it exemplifies the fact that for all the work that Jamie Nelson and Brett Bonner and all those teachers have done to build that program, it's another meaningful choice and option that our students have for meeting their educational goals and achieving success. So with that, I believe my report is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to governing board reports. Dr. Sparks.
Just have to share that I'm excited for the first time in a long while to have Leader in Character again this evening. Excited to see people in the audience and be able to give those awards out this evening. Just excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lowell.
I just like to acknowledge Green Valley Rotary Club and the Valley Verde Rotary for the contributions that they've made to our schools and for continuing as a community to support our kids in our school, and how much that's appreciated.
Thank you. Ms. Reese.
No report tonight.
Ms. Warner.
I would just like to take a moment and just say how devastating it was to find out that we've lost another member of our Sahuarita family
Yes.
to COVID, and that's about all I have for today.
Thank you. I have nothing to add. Why a large number of people are here in the audience tonight, and very excited about this. So,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Valenzuela.
President Opalka. And again, we measure success a lot in these days, in this era, by the resumption of things that we once took very much for granted. And among those is the Leader in Character Award. I think we would agree that it's, I think for the board, and I know for myself, it's truly one of my favorite parts of our school board meetings, because we take the time to recognize outstanding students who exemplify through their daily actions the highest example of virtue, of character, and of good citizenship. And we believe that that's an important part of the educational process. So this program began 14 years ago in a desire to do just that, to honor and recognize students who exemplify leadership, who exemplify high character, and high level of citizenship. So I want to thank our partners who have been with us from the beginning. This is, I think, again, year 14. And I thank the Green Valley News, Jamie Verwise and Dan Scherer here from the Green Valley News. They continue to be our sponsors. After we recognize these students, I think Jamie's here, camera in hand, to take their picture so that we can put them in the newspaper and let everybody know how wonderful they are. And also I thank the good folks at Freeport-McMoran who continue to be extremely supportive, and they're providing the gift card that our students receive to one of the bookstores. I think it's Barnes & Noble, in support of literacy, but also in recognizing them as a token of appreciation for the great example and the leadership that they demonstrate. So we're going to modify it a little bit from how we usually do it, COVID style, but still make it very special. President Opalka is going to do the honors of handing them their certificates. Students, when your name is called, if you could come up, receive your award, you can walk across the stage and kind of assemble. Mr. Bonner will help you over there, and they're going to kind of line you up in proper position. And Ms. Verwise right there is going to take your picture and make sure you all get recognized in the newspaper. So you'll get a certificate, a letter, and also a gift card to Barnes & Noble so that you can buy all kinds of wonderful books. And moms and dads and grandpas and brothers and sisters and friends, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for the job you're doing in raising such amazing young people. They really are our future, and we're grateful for your investment in their success. So here we go. Again, this is special. We haven't done this in over a year and a half, Mr. Opalka. We recognize first the Leader in Character from Sopari Elementary School, 5th grade. Congratulations, Diana Miles. Diana, come on up. Generally, it's one student from each school, but as you know, we have a couple of big K-8s, so we recognize an elementary and a middle school honoree from these schools. And the first one of these is Anza Trail School, where our first leader in character is Yamila Garcia Ortez. Come on up. And our middle school honoree from Anza Trail School is an 8th grader. Congratulations, Ava Torres. This next person is our honoree from Sahuarita Primary School. And before I recognize and honor him, I'd like to recognize and thank his father. Robert Wood is deployed with U.S. forces overseas and is participating through our live stream. Thank you, sir, for your service. Thank you for what you're doing for our country. And we're proud to recognize your son as the leader in character from Sahuarita Primary School. Congratulations, Braden Wood. I think I heard that they were both watching virtually, so we'll make sure that Braden gets his special award. And we'll move on to Sahuarita Intermediate School, where it is my honor and pleasure to recognize their leader in character, 5th grader Ryan Ramirez. Come on down. And as Ryan comes down, I will move across the street to Copperview Elementary School, where the honoree is also a 5th grader. Congratulations, Valeria Ramirez. Come on down. And we're now up to one of our K-8s, where again we do recognize 2 students, and our first student's a kindergartner, so it didn't take too long to make a big impression. Congratulations to the leader in character, kindergartner Madison Brown. And still at Wrightson Ridge School, it's our pleasure to recognize the leader in character for middle school from Wrightson, 6th grader Isabel Moorhead. Come on down. It's tough being a kindergartner on this big old stage. That's what you get for being awesome.
Being shy is good.
All right, Isabel's here, so I think we're ready to move on to Sahuarita Middle School, and the leader in character from SMS is Nalia Calazo. Come on down. And now we move over to our high schools. Both of our honorees this month are seniors. Our Sahuarita High School leader in character is Alessandra Segundo. And from Walden Grove High School, it's my pleasure to announce their leader in character, Melanie Fabian. Melanie. You know, if you can think back a year and a half ago at these meetings, that was the end. But now we have a new school. It's our virtual school, Sahuarita Digital Pathways Academy. And it's my pleasure to recognize the leader in character from SDPA, 1st grader, Zelda Ferris. Zelda, congratulations. I believe that concludes our leader in character. And again, Ms. Jamie Verwise looks like she's got camera out. I guess she's going to take the picture right there. Smiles. Show your certificate. And they'll get you in the newspaper so everybody knows how wonderful you are. Congratulations, and congratulations also to the families and parents that are here to celebrate with our students.
All right, great. Thank you. Congratulations again to all those students. Next, we'll move on to item 6, the call to public. And for the in-person guidelines, consideration and discussion of comments and concerns from the public for those wishing to address the governing board on items not on tonight's agenda may do so at this time or at the board's discretion at the time the items appear on the agenda. Speakers are requested to hold their comments to 2 minutes or less. 20 minutes will be allowed for both online and in-person comments. In accordance with Arizona open meeting law, board members may not respond, comment, or ask questions of speakers regarding issues not on the agenda. Any comments not read during this agenda item will still be entered into the public record. We'll give the families a moment to exit.
Can I ask a question, Kevin?
Yeah.
Because I'm newer. If something is on the agenda, are we required to respond when the answer, or when the question is asked, or do we address it at the agenda time?
We typically hold it for the agenda time, I
Great.
believe, is our tradition. So that's.
Okay.
what
Thank
we'll do.
you.
Yep. Okay, Ms. Reese.
Our first speaker tonight is Sandra Pemberton.
And where's the mic? Right there, yeah. Yep, it's right there. Yes, right up to the podium there.
Primary caregiver for both myself and her dad. But she spends an hour at a time with 30 kids 5 times a day, 150 different humans, most of them unmasked. She wears a mask, but as science has proven, wearing a mask keeps others safe, but not the person wearing the mask. Now we see teachers and administrators being targeted for enforcing the quarantine rules in place by Pima County and the district. This school board is failing its charge to protect both its student and employee community. Now that one of the vaccines has FDA approval, there is no excuse to fall back on experimental drugs or emergency use authorization. Last year proved that schools could stay open with the right mitigation measures and low community spread. With moderate effort, transmission was kept low, though many of us sustained loss and continued to grapple with the continued effects of isolation and healing. The current hesitancy shown by this governing board in failing to institute common sense safeguards is appalling. This is not a matter of freedom. The minority voices are louder and speak more often at these meetings. Their complaints are putting everyone at risk. Arizona school kids are required to show proof of vaccination against many diseases. The much discussed and popularly flouted mandate against institutional mask policies in the state of Arizona does not take effect until September 29. Failure to enact a district-wide mask policy tonight and keep it up until that date of September 29th shows negligence on the behalf of those who undermine safety under the guise of personal freedom. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for Superintendent. Thank you, Board.
Georgiana Jake.
Hello, my name is Georgiana Jake, and I'm a teacher in the district. I wanted to start off by saying how happy we are to be back in person learning, even with a few bobbles that we've had in these 4 weeks. I'm here to bring up the issue of substitute teachers to you. As you guys know more than anyone, full-time teaching contract is for 5 periods of teaching plus 1 planning period. That planning period is valid and necessary. It's when we grade, obviously it's when we plan, and we use that planning period to get students who were quarantined or falling behind caught up. Lastly, it's when teachers can take a breath, collect ourselves, and after the past year and a half, we need that moment. It's now week 4 of the new school year, and every teacher I work with, as well as myself, has been called multiple times to take that planning period and serve as a substitute in someone else's class. In doing so, it takes all of us to 6/5, basically. The lack of substitute teachers must be addressed. I'm very aware that this community skews older, but much like the nursing industry has done for the past 18 months, perhaps the board should consider raising the wage for substitutes in order to get more on the availability roster down here. Thanks for your time and stay safe.
Thank you.
Karen Rohan.
Good evening. I'm Karen Rojan, and this is my 24th year in the district. I'm a teacher at both Walden Grove High School and Sahuarita Digital Pathways Academy, and I'm also the Sahuarita Education Association president this year. This year, teachers are embracing the motto, new year, new challenges, new opportunities. I just wanted to say that the SEA is looking forward to working with the district's administration and the school board toward our common goal of providing an excellent education for all students in our district. On a more personal note, I wanted to thank Dr. Hill from Walden Grove High School for her professionalism and for maintaining a campus where teachers can do their job. Take care of the teachers, and the teachers will take care of the students.
Thank you.
Sydney Watts.
I'm here today to ask that you put a stop to the county's recommended contact tracing. Last week, my SHS freshman was quarantined, and this week, my senior. We would be at senior night right now, but she isn't allowed to be at school due to contact tracing. It's important to note her contact was on or around August 20th. She has no symptoms, and my son never developed symptoms, and it's questionable that he was even in close contact with the student who tested positive. How many times is this going to happen? With this process, they could both be sent home again next week, and the next, and the next. The quarantine process doesn't make sense. If they test negative on day 5, they should be allowed at school on day 5, not have to wait till day 7, as noted on the letter that was sent home. Personally, I'm not testing my kids. It's cruel, especially when they're not sick. They would rather wait the extra 3 days, and not to mention the financial hardship you're putting on families to pay for that test. Students should not know the vaccination status of their peers, yet you're exposing openly every unvaccinated child in front of their classmates. If they get to know who's unvaccinated, we should get to know who's testing positive, so at least we can dispute your close contact claim. It's been proven mental health among students has declined as well as their academic progress. I'm sure you're aware of the significant drop in preliminary AZ merit scores. If you're not, you should be. You, as the board, allowing contact and trace and quarantine are directly responsible for this. I have also viewed your own COVID dashboard and was shocked to see the very few cases that there are compared to how many you quarantined with just this month of school. This means students were quarantined for no reason. They have missed
That's time,
enough,
Ms. Watts.
suffered enough through this pandemic. It's time to stop. Leave them alone, leave my kids alone, and stop allowing Pima County to harm them mentally and academically. Thank you.
Lou Sampson.
The Center for Disease Control seems to be more highly influenced by politics than by science, specifically the American Federation of Teachers Union. Emails obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show correspondence between the AFT and CDC with the White House carbon copies. It was found the AFT was helping to formulate scientific guidance for our major health organization, the CDC. This is not how science-based guidelines should work. The AFT and NEA wanted mandatory vaccines and masks before teachers could be allowed back in the classroom. These are the same people who backed school closures last year. They also want no charter schools allowed with the government funding. It reminded me of the discussion last meeting where the Arizona School Board is going to be discussing charter schools, which I'm sure you don't want. If more masking and lockdowns occur, you're going to lose more students next year. I'm going to encourage people to start contacting their state legislators to write a bill letting money follow the student, wherever the parents choose to send them. When $42 billion is spent by the National Institute of Health, and 2% of it is on COVID, and 0% is on masks, that seems to be, there's no scientific data on masking. And if COVID is so dangerous, why do we have open borders with people flowing over, no masks, no contact tracing, and no vaccines?
Brittany Blaylock.
Hi, I have two kids in the Sahuarita Unified School District, and I want to start off by saying that I choose not to mask my kids, and I have seen the effects of how much better they're doing this year without a mask. Academically, they're doing better. Socially, they're doing better. They actually look forward to going to school. I think masks should be optional. That's part of freedom and living in America and our constitutional rights. I don't get the fact that if you can get vaccinated, the teachers can get vaccinated, anyone can get vaccinated that's an adult, so why do our kids have to suffer and feel that, oh, should I be wearing a mask, should I not be wearing a mask? That's not something they should be worried about. I really think the whole mask issue needs to just get dropped. Let it be optional. Why are you afraid of COVID if you can get vaccinated? Why should all these kids who have such a high survival rate, based on the the Academy of Pediatrics, they said that the flu on average, has 37 to 199 deaths per flu season. And based on COVID, there was recently on August 19th, this was posted, 4.59 million have tested positive for COVID for children. The mortality rate of states reported is 0.00% to 0.22% of all child deaths related to COVID. That is the percentage. So our kids don't need to suffer. They need to enjoy being kids. They need to be focusing on getting taught in class.
That's time, Ms. Guadalupe.
One last thing, me along with other parents that could not attend today, we are going to withdraw our kids from the school district if for some reason the legislation that was passed, that law is broken and mask mandates continue or restart or whatever. I couldn't think of the word.
That's the last of the in-person call to the public.
Do we have any virtual?
Yes, we do have online submissions. The first is from Ashley Coleman. You historically kept cases at bay last year by implementing logical safety measures. Now you're making decisions in order to appease unruly, unreasonable, uneducated parents. Do you not know how to deal with them? Do the governor's baseless laws intimidate you? Are you hoping he'll slip the district some funds if you comply? Why is our kids' safety so unimportant to you this time around? I was confident SUSD would follow suit with the other Arizona districts. Clearly, my expectations were far too high. This next one is from Hang Zhang. As a parent, I strongly urge the board to require universal masking on all school campuses as per the latest CDC and AAP guidance. I know that masks are not 100% effective. That being said, we have a moral obligation to protect our children and community with layers of mitigation that are evidence-based. Hopefully, all our children will soon have an opportunity to be vaccinated. Until then, we must continue to adapt our strategies as needed. Thank you for your time and consideration. Amanda Edwards. My daughter is a fourth grader at Wrightston Ridge and was being picked on and pressured and threatened by a couple of her peers to wear a mask. The first day she handled it on her own by just stating she did not want nor did she have to wear one. This, however, happened again the next day, and luckily this time the teacher heard it and addressed it with the children. Since then, it seems to have stopped, but this is just another example of how masking is affecting our children's lives. So sad. From Stephanie Stewart. My SUSD students happily wear their masks with few complaints. There are many arguments that masks don't work. That is correct when they are not worn properly. When worn properly, they work very well. The problem with optional masks is that there is no one to remind young students to put them back on or wear them properly. You have seen the anger and frustration in parents over the weeks regarding quarantines. If mask wearing can prevent even a fraction of those, why not wear a mask? From Mario Gonzalez, as a parent of 2 students in the district, I ask you to please consider a new mask mandate for all students and staff. I receive notifications every day about new COVID cases in the schools. This should not be a question of staying in line with political parties, but of keeping our kids safe regardless of any stances. We should never have to ask in hindsight whether we did enough to keep our kids safe and healthy. We should make the decision in advance to protect all so that we never have to. From Stephanie Stewart, against the argument for letting parents decide on masks. Let parents decide if their child can walk, stand, or eat on the bus. Let parents choose if the recommended school vaccines are necessary. Let parents decide whether to wear the uniform or not. Let parents decide if the child with allergies can sit next to the student that brings peanut butter every day. The above supports public health and safety. So do masks. I ask you to remember the goal: keep schools open. From Katie Harrell, as a community physician, recognizing the impact of disease outbreak on a population health level is innate. Children are not immune to COVID-19, and masks are a proven safe measure to greatly reduce disease transmission. Schools have a legal duty to protect students from imminent harm while in the classroom, and we know that this disease is a serious threat to life and livelihood. Do your job and implement universal masking and other mitigation measures to keep your community safe. From Kathy Dexheimer. As a parent and staff member, I wish to express my support for Dr. Hill and the Walden Grove administration and staff for their effort to follow the codes regarding COVID-19 Pima County health procedures. I would not feel safe sending my daughter to school if it weren't for the efforts of the administration at dealing in the proper manner with COVID on campus. We as a staff also support all that they do to keep not only the kids, but us safe as well in these trying times. From William Becker. In this time of misfortune, mistrust, and extreme political polarization, it is difficult to find something that everyone can agree on. Our children's health and safety, however, should be the one thing that we can all agree should be priority. It's easy to think your child won't get COVID or will have minor symptoms and get over it. However, an increasing number of children are being hospitalized for this. As a parent of a child that is recovering from cancer and a parent that has spent countless hours in hospitals wondering if my child was going to survive, I can tell you that I never want to be in a hospital with a sick child again. I would never want another parent to experience this as well. The percentage of students testing positive in the Sahuarita Unified School District is among the highest in the area. Masks are not going to solve the issue entirely. However, they are effective in reducing rates of transmission and most effective when everyone is wearing them. And lastly, from Heather Thompson, when do we stop the political narrative on our school campus? When is SUSD going to get back to basics and educate, not indoctrinate our children? I have always appreciated the education my children have received through SUSD until SUSD decided wokeness was more important than just educating our children. My child in first grade should not know who their teacher voted for in an election. Your job as educators is to teach reading, writing, and math. When do we get back to basics? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move on to item number 7, the Arizona School Accountability and State Assessment presentation. Dr. Vanswith.
Thank you, President Opalka, members of the board. You know, in the midst of these complexities and this ongoing thing we call the pandemic and pandemic-related operations, it's important that we always continue to keep a focus on the fact that we're here to educate young people and to teach in a quality way and to promote learning and to measure that learning. We remain steadfast in that commitment, and this evening I've asked Assistant Superintendent Brett Bonner to address an update regarding the state assessments, and as you'll hear from him, there are themes of uncertainty, but there are also some themes of encouragement in terms of the progress that our teachers, our students, our community is making in this quest for raising student achievement. Mr. Bonner.
Thank you, Dr. Valenzuela, members of the board, and members of the Sahuarita community. Before we begin, I just want to make sure, because of visibility purposes, if you log on your screen, the PowerPoint presentation is on the agenda, so you can review the slides. It's also being viewed publicly right here on the side of the building area for visibility purposes. In addition to that, we'll post it on our webpage just for public access. So again, our full opportunity to share and keep our families informed. Thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes to share information about the Arizona A through F accountability system and the state updates regarding a lot right now. So if you could go to the next slide, and I'd like to start off by just saying what typically would look like an ABCD order in operations and systems really at this point is a alphabet soup. Lots of transition. There's still some uncertainties about how we're moving forward as a state with accountability formulas to determine letter grades. In addition to that, just the known disruption with COVID-19 directly impacted our assessment scores, our assessment systems, and we have major changes coming our way with what tests we'll be administering coming up this school year in spring of 2022. Next slide, please. So my goal this evening is to present the following objectives and briefly highlight some of these items. One, give you an update on the A through F accountability system. The second item, I want to share some of our state assessments. I would like to look at some historical trends. So where we were pre-COVID, also some really interesting data to look at some of our major curriculum initiatives and the direct impact it had on our assessment scores. There's a strong correlation, especially with our math adoption, that shows very favorable outcomes of our new curriculum with mathematics, which is called Curriculum Associates Ready Math. In addition to that, share some grade level data and some comparison data. Would also like to talk briefly about how we're responding to the data, how we're moving forward, and of course open up for any questions that the board may have or any comments that the board may have. Next slide, please. So moving forward, the A through F accountability system is in transition. It is part of the alphabet soup, a lot of uncertainty. I'd like to show this document that was distributed pre-COVID. 2018-2019 school year, if you look at the top left of that graphic, Sahuarita Unified School District and school districts throughout the state took the state assessment called the AZ Merit. That was our last administration of the AZ Merit in spring of 2019. As you can see on that graphic, in 2019-2020, the COVID year, we were shut down during spring 2020. The state gave a waiver. No state testing was given spring 2020. But if you notice on there, the metric shifted. It was supposed to change from AZ Merit to AZ M2. No test was administered statewide. Therefore, we have no assessment data. In spring 2020 to 2021, this past year, assessments did return in place, and it was the AZ M2 for grades 3rd through 8th. And then for 10th grade, it was the 10th grade specific AZM2 test. We did the best we could under the uncertainty with schools being in hybrid and attendance not being in full operation. Some interesting data that I'd like to share with the board. Although we were in hybrid spring of 21, we still administered AZM2. As a district, we had an 85% participation rate, which to me, under those conditions, I think is pretty good. It's pretty high. Parents had the option to not take the test. We didn't force them. We weren't mandated to make them come in. We encouraged it. We provided the placements and accommodations. So out of the 3,047 students in 3rd through 8th grade and 10th grade, 2,577 students actually took that assessment, which gave us an 85% participation rate. A lot of change coming our way moving this spring and beyond, and I'll highlight those in my next slide. Okay, what's coming our way? Starting this spring, grades 3rd through 8th grade will be administered the new assessment called the ASSA, which is the Arizona Academic Standards Assessment. That's for grades 3rd through 8th grade beginning spring 2022. This assessment is aligned directly to our state standards that are approved by Arizona Department of Education and the State Board of Education. In addition to that, parents should have received the AZM2 results. We sent them home this past Friday, August 13th. And actually, that was two weeks ago, August 13th. And if you're in high school, we handed out the results during the registration process. So all of the student parent reports from spring of 2021 have gone home. In spring of 2022, this coming spring, as I referenced earlier, AZM2 is no longer. The state is now administering under the menu of assessments the ACT for grades 11, and then for grades 9th, the ACT Aspire. I think this is a really good move. I feel that students will buy more into the assessment. It does help with college placement or post-secondary experiences, whether it's military, junior colleges, universities, state colleges. So I really feel the state's making a wise choice moving to the ACT test instead of the AZM2 for high school students. As I mentioned earlier, in grades 9th, we'll have a practice ACT, which is ACT Aspire for 9th graders. During spring of 2022, we'll have an assessment for grades 5, 8, 11 for the Arizona Science Assessment. And again, it's all aligned to the Arizona State standards for science standards. And the state board and the ADE has not determined a final school letter grade formula. It is still in transition. So where are we with letter grades? Right now, the state just released under House Bill 2402, which prohibits ADE from issuing letter grades. So we're in a year of transition again. So if you look on our letter grade formula, it's going to show letter grade of P, which means pending, P for pending, until the state board identifies the new formula using the new metrics, so the ASSA for grades 3 through 8 and ACT, and we'll pull in college and career readiness factors as well. Once we get that formula, I'll be able to share that with our principals, our leadership team, our families, of course the board, but that has not been determined at this time. Okay, next slide. Just for historical context, I wanted to share where our letter grades were pre-COVID and before all of these legislative mandates came into place. This is all based off of spring 2019. Again, we're hitting the refresh button, new metrics, new formulas still pending, so we have the P letter grades, but back in 2019, Onto Trail was a letter grade of an A, Copper View a letter grade of an A, Sahuarita High School letter grade of a C, Sahuarita Intermediate School letter grade of an A, Sahuarita Middle School letter grade of a C, 1 point away from being a letter grade B, Sopri Elementary School letter grade D, half a point away from being a letter grade C, Walden Grove High School letter grade B, and Wrightson Ridge at that time, because they were a newer school, they did not have the formula or the data to give them a determined letter grade, so that's why you see a P there for pending. I will point out that because Sopri Elementary School does have a letter grade of a D, they're under school improvement, which I'm working closely with Mr. Heinzelman, the staff, parent open houses, communication regarding our plans to help improve. And we're doing professional development, we're providing extra tutoring hours for students. In addition to that, we're working with our special education teachers and our director, Jess Beignet, to provide additional professional development at Sopri, along with our English language learner director, Jan Spooner, who's also helping working with our ELL students with more support services at Sopri Elementary School. And we are required by the state to submit what we call an integrated action plan to the state that's monitored annually. Okay, next slide. This is a lot of data, and I'm just going to highlight a few key points. But again, this will be posted, so I'm going to go through this somewhat quickly, but it's really telling in itself. I wanted to share kind of a baseline of where we were pre-COVID. As I referenced before, the district did approve a supplemental adoption of Saxon phonics for grades K through third grade. Third grade would be affected by that. We did that adoption in 17-18 school year. And I do believe there's a strong correlation with improvement in ELA, specifically in third grade. And you'll start to see that trend moving upward. A huge impact, a positive one, with our mathematics adoption with Curriculum Associates Ready Math. That occurred in school year 18-19. And you'll see significant gains in grades 3rd through 5th, 6th, 8th grade, there's a drop, 7th grade, there's an increase. But overall, definite improvements once we started implementing our new curriculum. So I'm really pleased about the professional development, the support, our metrics aligned to the curriculum. Parents have more access to online resources to support Curriculum Associates. And I believe it's been a great recommendation that our board and our community supported during that adoption process. And just for the board's record, during a September meeting, as requested, I'll highlight some of the curriculum adoptions that we've done as a district, talk about the process, how we involve stakeholders, ask for feedback, the policy involved to adopt curriculum. And there's also information online where you could actually look at what adoption we're implementing as we speak. And it's under our district webpage, under educational services, and you just type in curriculum, and all the resources will pop up online. And that's available now. You can see that at any time. So what you're seeing on this first graph is just an example of the AZ Merit, not the AZM2, and we're going to have a new test in 2022. But you can see the upward trends, the color graph. You can see the different colors represented by the schools down there. And the district in Arizona are the dotted lines, and this is specific to third grade ELA, English Language Arts. So again, some nice improvements in that area. That's one of the first years when we adopted Saxon phonics in third grade, which again is part of our literacy curriculum. It teaches phonemes, sounds, phonics, vocabulary, and has really helped with our literacy awareness and proficiency. The next slide, please. Third grade AZ merit for math. So spring 2019 would be the first data set that we pulled for the new curriculum. Again, great gains compared to prior years at most of our schools. Again, just another snapshot. Next slide, please. Fourth grade, this is ELA AZ merit, again, back from 2019. You can see the varying levels. Again, the dotted lines are state and district. The district is the blue dotted line. Arizona as a state is the orange colored dotted line, and each school represented by the line graphs by color code. In addition to the next slide, fourth grade math AZ merit. Sopri had a dramatic drop, but overall performances continue to rise. Next slide, fifth grade ELA, again shows our English language arts. I do believe that through our district efforts with our beyond textbooks adoption is a curriculum map. So it's not actually curriculum, it's a pacing guide that it tells teachers what standards that are aligned to the state requirements, what standards need to be taught by each grade level, K through 12th grade, in all the content areas, the pacing, so the recommended time to teach those standards, but the teachers have the autonomy to deliver the instruction. So it's not so restricted in the sense that it's cookie cutter. It is structured in the sense that if you're in third grade, and parents, when you look at the third grade standards, teachers have a map to know, I need to teach these standards within this window of time by the end of the year to make sure I cover all those expectations by the course end. And that is also available on our webpage. You have full transparency about our curriculum maps under the curriculum resources page. Okay, next slide, please. Fifth grade, AZ Merit Math. Again, you can see the trends. Next slide, sixth grade. Some gains there. Sixth grade mathematics, slight drop. Next slide to seventh grade English language arts. Seventh grade mathematics. Again, a huge gain overall in our middle school level. And again, it's grades K through 8th grade is the Curriculum Associates Mathematics adoption. And next slide, 8th grade, ELA. And scroll down to the next slide, 8th grade mathematics. And then high school, English language arts. Next slide, Algebra 1. And then in 10th grade, back in 2019, ELA. And then the last one for geometry under AZ Merit. Okay, so next slide, 11th grade, ELA. And then Algebra 2. All right. So 2020 results come out of the formula due to COVID, no testing. We then transitioned into a new assessment, so again, a different metric, which was AZM2, spring of 2021, this past year. I don't have comparable data to share. I did include in your packet, your board packets, again, this is also posted online, the individual breakdowns by school and by grade level of students that are meeting or exceeding proficiency levels, so students that are passing. You can't really compare 2019 to 2021. It's a completely different assessment. So what I wanted to do is to give you a gauge of how we're performing against the state and then as a district. So looking at this bar graph, what you're looking at is last spring, 2021, as a district compared to the state. So for example, I'll highlight third grade. For example, in red, as a district, 43% of our students passed compared to the state at 35% for English language arts. For example, sixth grade, 50% versus the 35% compared to the state. The challenging part is this test is going away again. So we're going to have a completely new metric this coming spring with the ASSA. So we'll have a whole new formula and metric system. Next slide with the AZ M2 math results. Again, the district's in the red bar graph, followed by the blue bar graph, identifying the passing rates. If I could take any summary, I expect our schools to outperform the state. As a district, I expect our schools to outperform the state. In all cases, we've done that except at the high school level. And so we'll continue to work in that area, continue to target that area. But at both ELA and mathematics, as a district, we are outperforming the state level. Okay, so therefore what? I'm sharing data, results, outcome. How we continue to move forward and improve is that it's critical that our curriculum adoptions are aligned to the state standards. I will share more about our specific curriculum adoptions during a September board meeting. I also feel it's important, whether it's beyond textbooks or whatever you want to call a special name of a curriculum map, it's important to have a roadmap of what we as teachers are expected to teach, which are the articulated grade level standards in all content areas approved by the State Board of Education, ADE. And it's important to know what standards we need to teach, when we need to teach it, the window, and of course, having that teacher autonomy on how we deliver that instruction aligned to the standards. We have blueprints to help teachers map out that process, and with every adoption that we've done, major adoption, so for Saxon and mathematics, curriculum associates, we actually customize our curriculum maps. So in the summertime, we bring teachers together, we look at the new curriculum maps and the standards, and we take the curriculum, scope and sequence, and we map it out so it aligns to the curriculum, and teachers are part of that process. We also work with our reteach and enrich model, where there's a pull-out time designated at all of our schools, where based on feedback, the reteach is significant right now because of the gap year we had, where more intervention, support services, it's like an in the school day tutoring time, or there's enrichment opportunities like art or something beyond your normal elective. The main focus this year is the reteach to help minimize any deficiencies from last year with all of the hybrid and missed class time. Daily math skills is part of the grades K through 8th grade, where students are practicing their mathematics facts. And we have a DMS system through beyond textbooks, and or they have the option to use math fact practice with our math curriculum. For our professional goals, as part of Prop 301, all of our classroom teachers are targeting goals specific to reteach and enrich. So how can I help students that are struggling to either provide extra support or assistance, or what can I do to help enrich them with a different activity or art or different type of extracurricular activity. But the big focus again is the reteach. We continue to implement 21st century grants at Sahuarita High School and Sahuarita Middle School. We have schools that are Title I. All of our schools have a reading specialist in grades K through 5, which means they're highly trained and endorsed by state certification to provide reading support and intervention to our lowest reading performers. And we also have a gifted program that's housed at Sopery, where students that are in gifted get to take a day out of the week beyond their gifted cluster classroom to get enrichment activities and more inquiry-based instruction out of the classroom. We have a standards-based report card K through 5th grade that directly aligns to the state standards. So every beginning of the school year, in fact, we had this meeting last Wednesday, we bring teachers together throughout the district, we take our report cards, we take our curriculum maps, and we say, okay, this is what's being taught first quarter, it aligns to the to the curriculum sequenced accordingly, and we do that every year. The goal is not to turn your report card into a 20-page document. It's still front and back, but it does evaluate how students are performing. Instead of just having an arbitrary A, B, or C, this is much more specific on how kids are doing academically in areas that they could target for improvement, or that they are demonstrating proficiency in. We do have a technology resource for our computer labs. It's called Easy Tech, where students use the curriculum on how to build Excel spreadsheets, PowerSchool, web and internet safety protocols. So that's part of our elementary curriculum with our computer skills. We still administer site-based assessments at the high school level for freshmen and sophomores. It's called Galileo ATI. There's a new owner now, so it's called Imagine Learning, a new company. But it provides feedback to classroom teachers on how students are doing in English language arts and mathematics. In addition to that, grades K through 8 take iReady reading math diagnostics and reading diagnostics. And it helps teachers identify areas that students are very proficient in or that they're struggling in, and then therefore we can really respond to their individualized needs. Teachers are trained on how to run the diagnostics, and they have access right in their classrooms to help monitor how students are doing, provide individualized interventions and support, and also enrichment opportunities for kids that are demonstrating outstanding proficiency levels. We have a great opportunity in middle school. So if you're a math wizard, SUSC is the place to be. We have an advanced track for mathematics, so students can start taking pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry at the middle school level. So we offer high school credit courses in middle school for mathematics. And then, of course, at the high school level, we have advanced placement courses, AP, and, of course, dual enrollment. We have a lot of professional development that's customized to teaching and learning, all the content, better instruction, elements of instruction, so how to teach to an objective, classroom management. We also have professional development targeting different learning styles, and this as far as inquiry-based instruction, project-based learning. Again, the board has been very supportive for our PD, and I would say 99% of our facilitators are classroom teachers in our district, which is powerful. So we take our content experts, and they're teaching our other teachers throughout the district. One of the initiatives we started for any new teacher in the district, their second year, they go through our Reading Foundations training to help teachers become better reading teachers. So we teach the research of reading and literacy, provide the resources and support, and that happens their second year within our district. And I did highlight some information about our curriculum adoptions. The high schools have an effective model about reteach and enrich, where they have an hour lunchtime. They call it the power hour or Mustang hour. And during that hour time, if students are either at a D or an F in a course, that hour is designated for students to get extra tutoring, to receive additional help. For students that are, this is an incentive, if they're performing at a higher level, they get an hour lunch. They don't have to go to the power hour unless they want to. It's always open. But that's at both of our high schools, and it's worked out quite well. And finally, with the ESSER 3 funds for our community and for the board, we've gone through an extensive process from having meetings with staff and SCAF. We've had public hearings with our community. We've had surveys go out seeking feedback on how we should spend the ESSER 3 funds. Part of that mandate requires 20% of that allocation to go to learning loss. That's what the mandate calls for. And based on parent feedback, teacher feedback, the survey data, it really targets 3 areas. So with that allocation for ESSER 3, based on the feedback that we collected through this collective process, the 3 priorities, not in any particular order, will be tutoring at all of our school sites throughout the course of this year, free tutoring at all school sites. In addition to that, we'll be able to offer summer school scholarships, so free summer school up to a certain number of students. So for example, at the high school level, we'll be able to fund 200 scholarships, and then we'll have a K-8 summer school program, no charge, and we're expanding that program by almost 20% enrollment, so more students can attend. And then the third item was specific to mental health, about providing support for like counseling services, mental health services support, and that will be the top 3 for the ESSER 3 funds. A lot of information and a lot of uncertainty still, but I wanted to share with you where we're at, where we were last year, and where we're going this spring. And I'm open for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonner. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a question. So you mentioned comparing 2019 and 2021, that it wasn't equal, they were different assessments. Do you mean that it was literally a different test that they took?
Correct. It went from, in spring of 2019, we had the AZM2 test. Spring of 2020, COVID year, there was no test administered at all statewide. Spring of 2021, we went to the AZM2. We were supposed to take AZM2 2020, but we didn't test.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand why the percentage of students that were proficient or highly proficient would be affected by that.
One, it could be a new assessment. 2, it could be, there's definitely a direct correlation with being impacted by COVID. So that's a definite impact.
Yeah.
Another being it's a whole new metric, so that we don't have the familiarity of the assessment, could be another factor. We don't have any, that's really our baseline year, that first year. And the challenging part too is, as I mentioned, next year we're gonna have a completely different assessment.
Okay, and then I had another question on I just was noticing in these numbers that one school stood out as being significantly impacted with lowered rates, and that would be Sopari. So when we look at our total numbers with the district versus the state, that's not really a fair assessment of how we're doing if we're letting one of our schools go by the wayside, which I'm not saying we are, but it's happened. And so I know you mentioned Sopari professional development. What else are we doing out there?
Great question. And part of the impact to Sopari is directly involved with the number count of students. When you look at, for example, let's say Onto Trail, and you have a high number of students in third grade, and you look at Sopari when your entire third grade is 15 students.
Well, this is percentages, though.
Agreed. And there's other factors of special education, percent numbers, ELL numbers, and so what you do then, in this case, because they have been underperforming, we were working closely with ADE, submitting an integrated action plan, which is really a school improvement plan, where we look at all the assessment data that you're referencing, we look at subgroups that are affected that aren't performing at the appropriate level, and we have to come up with specific target plans. How are we going to demonstrate growth? So with that growth, we look at standards that they're not performing well on, and we provide training, we provide interventions, we provide tutoring. We applied for the state grant through ADE to offer teachers at Sopari to stay after school to provide more additional tutoring for students. In addition to that, I have to meet with ADE officials to talk about our progress. We use our iReady benchmark data to show any growth or areas of concern. So we're using a lot more metrics, and we're actually individualizing instruction for all those students. So our hope is to have an outcome of improvement, and it's regulated, it's managed, it's evaluated, but we're adding the new component this year with ELL, Jan Spooner, and our Director of Special Ed, Jess Banier, to actually provide direct teacher training on better systems to help English language learners or better strategies to help special education students at Sopari.
That sounds really great, thank you. I had one more question on the power hour. You mentioned that occurs during lunch. So if I'm understanding correctly, a student who has a D or an F in a class will go to tutoring during lunch as mandatory, and a student who does not has lunch?
Good question. So the power hour is a designated hour at both of our high schools. 30 minutes is lunchtime. So if you are a student that has a D or an F, you would still get your lunch, and then that other half hour you need to go to power hour for tutoring. If you're not in the area identified as needing help or intervention, you get an hour lunch. Or you could have lunch and then go in for some additional tutoring. A lot of times kids may have their lunch and then go practice band or music, but we have a designated time every day at the high school to, one, make sure you eat, have your lunch, and then that other 30 minutes you have that required tutoring to help really to provide that intervention for a failing grade.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Mr. Bonner, also in Power Hour, they have a lot of student clubs at that time too, which is really great for the kids. They don't have to stay after school. So if their grades are excelling, they've got that extra half hour. There's a club time for the kids as well. That's good.
Mr. Bonner, just really quickly, is there a way to take the data easily and extrapolate it to where we can follow cohorts?
Can you say that again?
Is there a way to, so for example, when we're looking at the actual percentages of passing for third grade reading and writing, we've got it based on year, but that's a different class each year. Is there a way to follow a class through the years?
So looking more at longitudinal kind of
Yeah,
results?
well, and so I'm just going to throw this out as an example. So in 2019, there was a 58% passage at proficient or highly proficient at the Sahuarita Intermediate School. If you go down to the 2021 numbers for Sahuarita Intermediate School, there wasn't the drop in the cohort. Yes. It was only a 3% drop in the cohort. I think that by being able to look at the data in where we can follow cohorts, we can potentially identify an issue in a single year that might arise, and hopefully correct it before the next year.
if we can look at it that way.
There is a way.
Okay.
There used to be a system a few years ago, a few years ago. Dr. Sparks, you may recall this being on the board for some time. It was called Arizona Dash. And you could log on to Arizona Dash, teachers had access, and you could actually track cohorts and look at areas of performance. Well, Arizona Dash hasn't been updated for several years. It's gone. Yeah. So, therefore what? We need to respond to what you're raising as a concern. How do we track those students in the sense of how do we get those early interventions on, those additional supports? How do we know what's coming to that next grade level so we could provide that support? All of our school principals put together data folders, and that data is then compiled and shared as they have their incoming students come to their classrooms. So that's one effort, and there are more reports that we get from the state that are more specific. It's not just a general percentage. It'll tell students on if they're performing poorly, they'll identify the standard or areas that they're not performing well in, and teachers will have that data at hand. So I know when I was a principal at Onza Trail, in my prior school experience as a principal, that data, we would compile that, we would share that with our upper level grade that our students were leaving me from or going to, or any students that I was receiving. I had data to then provide that additional support, which also then supports why our iReady metrics are so important. So to get that baseline data of current year performance, we look at both reading and mathematics, and we're able to get a stronger gauge. And I find that assessment more valuable than just the one snapshot of the state assessment, because that's actually the curriculum we're using, that's aligned to our state standards, and it's really measuring how students are performing at grade level with that specific standard, and the teachers have that data immediately. So we've had to adapt to your question, and we do provide that data and resources, but iReady, I feel, through those metrics are the best way to help gauge what we're working with or how we can help students better attain mastery in those standards.
Okay.
Mr. Bonner.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious as to, over the last couple of years, I know there's been a lot of discussion about how we're integrating middle school math performance into these scores. So we have a cohort of students at all the middle schools that take geometry and honors geometry versus 8th grade math. Is that, and I know in the past the state hadn't integrated those into, they were kind of in limbo, just lost assessment. Do we know yet in the new system, has there been any conversation? Are we going to include that number? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and this, for the audience purpose, as I mentioned earlier, if you're in middle school, if you're in 8th grade, you might be able to, if you're doing well in math, be eligible to take geometry, for example. So this question is, does the state differentiate between the 8th grade test or the geometry test? And to answer your question about moving into ASSA, the new assessment, I don't have the answer yet. I don't know, but I'll be glad to research that more. I know there was a lot of miscommunication by the state and not a lot of clarity on what was allowed, and it went back and forth where one year they were required to take their grade level test and not their higher level math test like a high school test, and then the state allowed us to do that, and we made that change. But as far as moving forward for spring of 2022 with the new assessment, I don't know, and I have not heard from the state, but I will continue to research that.
Okay, thank you, because it was a lot of lost assessment.
Correct.
Thank you.
And just for clarity purposes, the high school, again, will be taking the ACT, but 8th graders will be taking the grade level test. So just kind of based on that, I don't think they'll have a geometry specific exam. They will not have an algebra exam like we have historically. They're going to have just the ASSA grade level test. So I would project or foresee that our geometry kids will take the grade level test, or our pre-algebra students will take their grade level test because of the difference in high school with the ACT. That would be my projection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Brett, for presenting that. Next on our agenda is item 9, the new business governing board discussion and possible action of path forward plan update. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, sir. Thank you, President Opalka. Again, the path forward update and plan has been a regular element in some form or another of our meetings since the onset of the pandemic or shortly thereafter. As we know, this situation continues to change, and it's important for the board to have an opportunity just to receive updated information and also to have opportunities to make changes as the board feels is appropriate to the emerging and changing landscape of the situation. I thought this evening, I think it's fairly clear that over the last couple of weeks since our last meeting, the topic related to school operations and the pandemic has clearly been this issue of masks. At the state level, there's a lot of information swirling around. I think this evening, we heard that, I heard, and I was listening very attentively, multiple people who I believe are caring, invested in the community, want what's best for all of our kids. That's what we have in common. But you heard, frankly, a variety of different points of view about this and these types of topics. So I think it's fair and honest to acknowledge that that is the reality, and that we try and work to respect each other's thoughts and also to find commonality. The other thing I would say about it is that as we talk this evening, just like we've talked before, and we will talk again, I think we need to have the mindset that we're talking about this particular point at this particular time. This thing is not static, it's very dynamic, it's uncertain, it changes rapidly. So that situationality, I think, is important. So in terms of this evening, about masks or any other part of the plan, after conversation, A, you can choose to do nothing, in which case we have a plan. It's approved, it's authorized, it's in place. And in regards to masks, currently that is, masks are optional. Or if you wish, within the allowable legal parameters, you can choose to move to mandate the use of masks in schools, as some other districts have done, some have not. And within the allowable parameters of the law. So if it would be agreeable to you, President Opalka, I'd just like to make a few comments, a few points for your consideration as you have this conversation. And then at the end of that, I think it would be reasonable for the board to have a conversation and then to make whatever decision the board deems appropriate that it would like or not to do. If that would be agreeable, I'd like to share a few points. Okay, so just a few facts. Just, one of the things with this whole situation is there's a lot of information and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And sometimes that becomes part of the divide, part of the challenge. So point number one, as part of the last legislative session, the Arizona legislature did pass a law now known as Arizona Revised Statutes 15-342.05. Passed, included as part of what they call the budget reconciliation bill. So it kind of came in at the end, and the governor signed it. There's been some question about how it was done, whether it's legal, not legal. That is yet to be determined, but as of right now, that is the law. Another thing that I think is factual, or at least accurate to the best of my knowledge, and I've researched it, is that part, the legality of the law and how they did it, is probably not going to be determined, is not anticipated to be determined before the September 29th deadline that we've all heard about. What was determined by Judge Randall Warner of the Maricopa County Superior Court is simply that the law as it was crafted does not actually take effect until the given period after the session closes. So in this case, you've heard September 29th. That's where that came from. So that's all that the judge ruled on at this point. Again, may or may not change legally in the future, but it's not foreseen to happen before that. So that begs the question about the time frame. So that time frame is about 4 to 5 weeks away from right now. So we have to ask ourselves about the pros versus the cons. I will say that in my own personal opinion, I believe in using every mitigation tool that we have as given to us by public health experts and the kitchen sink to try and keep kids safe and in school. However, I will say that this particular issue, I do think, bears a significant amount of contextual consideration. And here's what I mean. One of them is that 4-hour issue, or 4-hour. It's not that fast. 4 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever September 29th is. Our kids have been through this fits and starts, hybrid, remote, back to hybrid, back to remote. And one of our goals this year, and I'm proud to say as I walk on school campuses that we're having success, is school has become a more consistent routine, as consistent as it can be, and that to me has a lot of value, and I would say that piece. Let me talk about the current cases, at least, again, at this point in time. We came into the new school year. It's not surprising. We know this virus, this new variant is contagious. We know that a lot of our students, based on just their age, are not currently vaccinated. And we also know that they're back in the full scope of traditional classrooms with everybody in one place. So it's not surprising we've had cases. Kind of jumped out in the first week. We got up as high as, I think, 36 active cases was the highest that I heard, or thereabouts. It kind of went down a little bit as kids came off of isolation and quarantine, and other kids came into it. As of this morning, the latest update that I got is that we have 19 active cases. Again, remember from the enrollment report, we have about 6,300 students. So we have 19 active cases. Another question that I asked our team was, how many of those are less than 12 years old? Because we know that those kids are not eligible to be vaccinated right now. And again, we've had some of those. They've come and gone. They've come on the list, and then they've done their quarantine, and then they're off. As of this morning, we had 5 in that category. So, and that's just one snapshot. So just for curiosity, I went back to November, right around Veterans Day. Now, why would you say would I look at Veterans Day? Because in the fall ramp up, if you want to call it that, when we were kind of in a parallel state where numbers were going up, and we were averaging in the state about 2,500 to 3,000 cases a day, which is kind of where it's been sitting the last couple of weeks. That was that time period. So I said, how many cases did we have back then? Remember, today we have 19 active cases. Back then, we had 15. My point is there just wasn't that much of a difference. And we had hybrid, and we had full masks, and we had no vaccine. So it's just kind of an interesting comparison. Another piece of data, attendance. I asked Mr. Bonner to dive into this. How are we doing with attendance? We know that as kids get sick, they miss school. Our attendance rate so far has been averaging over 90%, 92% to be exact, according to Mr. Bonner. So one of the things we're looking at is that local conditions. How are we managing? We're not denying that we're having challenges, but how are we managing it? Another thing that I did, I personally, if everybody was wearing a mask, I'd be happy. But in looking at this objectively, I'm just trying to look at the whole picture, because this thing is a complex, multifaceted determination. So another thing I did was I called one by one every single school principal, because as leaders of their respective campuses, they are leading their schools. They are managing their schools. And I said, tell me, this is an emerging issue. You saw what happened. You saw what happened in a couple of other districts. What are your thoughts? I just want to know. And it was just me, one-on-one with them. And an emerging pattern of concern I was kind of surprised, honestly. We have really strong, capable, competent school leaders, but they are different, and they're unique, and they have unique styles. But yet there was a common theme, and it was kind of like this. Again, it wasn't unanimous, but this was the prevailing consensus. One, personally, I think most all of them, probably without exception, were a lot like me. I wear my mask. I don't mind wearing my mask. If that's one thing that helps us keep kids in school and safe, I'm fine. I'd be okay if they were wearing masks. But they all, without exception, had real concerns. One of the concerns was the time. As we're trying to get back into full learning, adapt to this new reality, manage the cases that we have, trace students, call parents, address problems and conflicts that are just a part of the daily routine, and keep teaching and learning going on in a high quality way, I think that the time demands of a principal and of teachers that is already significant. There was a common concern that they were working on the fringes of that already. And from a time standpoint, given all the other variables at this point in time, with the 4 weeks and the current situation, if they had to do one more thing, that it would be an extreme challenge, is one of the things I heard. Similarly, effort, what I heard is we're very, very stretched, and we're focusing with the goal of keeping kids in school. The other thing that came up is this issue of what you put in, you got to enforce. And we'll enforce whatever we have to do, whatever orders we're given, or whatever the board decides that we have to do. But in this case, with this one, which is currently a choice, a local choice, I think the concern is that the enforcement part of this could consume a significant amount of time and be a challenge. What I heard was focus on, and I'm going off my notes, on a lot of the other mitigation strategies, including enforcing the orders, tracking and tracing, all those things that we're directed to do, the distancing, the cleaning, the sanitizing, the procedures, the routines, the PP&E, a lot of the things that have become kind of second nature now, continue to support choices. We're working with the county health department to offer convenient access to vaccines to those that are eligible and would like to do them. Give them the choice. Similarly, we're working to bring back the opportunity for people that voluntarily want to get tested, to have those opportunities. So that's one of the things that I heard. The one sentence that kind of that I heard from a principal, but it was kind of reflective, is they're just glad to have kids back in school. They're working really, really hard to help schools run smoothly. And the concern is kind of that balance, that tipping point of the scale as to whether imposing one more requirement at this particular point with the current reality, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't change and the scenario wouldn't change tomorrow or next week or 2 weeks. But right now, that it would be a challenge. I heard, I don't know it's worth distracting from everything else, especially for a short period of time. Another thing, just an observation. Currently, we are masks optional. That's just the way it is. And I go around schools regularly, every week, as do my cabinet colleagues, and we talk a lot. And my observation has been, and I think it was agreeable, those of us that have been in schools, and I was there again today. I was at a high school and I was at an elementary school, and it hadn't changed. Maybe there's a little more mask wearing as the conversation about this Delta variant has emerged. However, I will say that still, even today, I walked around and I do my thing. I check for instructional practices. I look for time on task. I look for lesson objectives. I look for teacher actions, all the things that we do as instructional leaders. And then I just kind of observe about mask usage. And I mean, at the most, I would say that in any given classroom, I'm seeing about maybe a third at the most of mask usage. So, I mean, it's not everything, but it is one indicator that given the choice, when all is said and done, our parents, the majority, are choosing to send their kids without a mask. And so I'm just saying that from the standpoint of, again, it's not one indicator, it's just several indicators to consider. And as I'm kind of headed toward the finish line of my remarks here, I'll just add one more. You know, money isn't everything, but it is something. And I will say that we will never, and I would never recommend making a decision solely based on money, but I'd be remiss if I didn't just state a fact. When the federal stimulus money was released, I was among a group of superintendents in the state of Arizona that contacted the governor's office and expressed very sincere concerns that the interest of the children of the Sahuarita Unified School District were not being met. I mean, frankly, I didn't think we were getting our fair share, given the disruptive force that the entire state faced. And the way the formula was written, it was disproportionately skewed, and we didn't get, frankly, what I believe was our fair share. So me and others contacted the governor. There was a whole process. In the end, the governor, through discretionary funds that were received from the federal government, determined that there was money that could be used to offset this gap. And coming off of a $5 million budget gap, it's just significant. I just can't ignore that. And so I will say that I anticipated getting more than what we're getting based on the original calculations, but we are in the queue and expected to get $1.7 million from the state. And again, the governor has stated that part of that discretion, which is the state's discretionary money, is based on the compliance with these kind of mask things. I think he said that by August 27th, you have to be in compliance. So I just wanted to mention, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything. Now, I realize that who knows what will happen. I know the Secretary of Education, Dr. Cardona, has sent a rebuke to our governor. I think President Biden has chimed in and made some general remarks about the issue. And again, I will never make a recommendation that potentially compromises safety based on money. But I think that I need to just mention that is one of the variables that's a fact, that's in the equation as a possibility. So let me see. With that, in summary, as you can hear and as you heard from our guests that got up to the microphone and shared their thoughts, this is not a clear-cut thing. It continues to be uncertain, changing rapidly. But in my opinion, at this particular point, the prudent course of action at this moment, in my professional opinion, is to continue the current path that we're on with a strong recommendation. I think everybody that's asked me, I'll say, yeah, I'm wearing mine, and I'd recommend it for anybody. But what the board's approved right now and what's allowable seems to be operating within acceptable, reasonable parameters. And I think we just need to continue to focus on those mitigation strategies. And no matter what determination the board makes, is my ask is that we continue to focus on being one community, cohesive, and striving for common ground. And with that, I thank you for the generous allotment of time, and I will stop and turn it over to you, President Opalka.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who has a comment?
I do.
Yeah, Ms. Warner, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to first start by saying that I have here from the Arizona State and Pima County disease outbreak look from the public health offices there, from U of A, and for the week ending in August 15th, there was a 10% increase. We're going on, let's see, sorry, I have it highlighted here. Transmission among adolescents and working age adults remains high. Rates among 5 to 9 and 10 to 14 years surpass those of other age groups for the first time during this pandemic. Transmission rates for those among 5 to 9 years is now 89% of their prior peak, whereas transmission rates for 10 to 14-year-olds are 73% of their prior peak. Children are now representing 25% of COVID cases, and the older population is representing fewer. They're down to about 8% of COVID cases. Now, this is tracking data, which is obviously always changing and dynamic, and not every state is reporting in the same ways. We don't have the same definition of who even qualifies as a minor. And it's, like you said, it's so complex that none of us are qualified to put together something like this, which is why I went to all the experts before I came to the meeting, because I just don't feel like principals at schools are experts on communicable diseases. Like, yeah, on the day-to-day stuff, and yeah, it is a hassle to do extra things at school. But we've got some stuff here that is saying, basically, if We do not apply the recommendations from the CDC, from the Arizona Department of Health Services, from the Office of the Superintendent, from the U.S. Department of Education, from the Pima County Health Department, from the Arizona Academy of Family Physicians, from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and I stopped printing there because I couldn't find one single reputable source that didn't say the same thing, and that was that to mitigate the spread of this disease, and as Delta variant becomes more transmissible and is impacting children in more ways, and we have no idea what the next variants will be like, we cannot pick and choose our methods of mitigation when not everyone qualifies for a vaccine. We know vaccines are the most effective defense we have. That history goes back a very long time. Obviously, it is a parent's choice in Arizona whether or not they vaccinate their child. I'm not here to argue that. I'm here to just say, without vaccines, which is a large portion of our children, they're predicting that we're going to see about 300 deaths per week by the end of August, early September. No, that's not all child deaths. But a child doesn't live in a bubble. A child has teachers, they have parents, they have family, they have siblings. So I don't understand when we just focus on this one thing, like, well, kids aren't getting that sick. Well, they're starting to, and they will be, and we still don't know the long-term effects of COVID in children because it's brand new for everyone. But I guarantee a kid who's just lost their parent to COVID because their parent wasn't able to get vaccinated is not coming to school ready to learn and not somebody that's going to feel embraced by our community. You mentioned that you go to school and you see kids, maybe a third of them wearing masks, and that's obviously evident of a parent's choice. But as someone who's spent time around children like yourself, if you send a kid to school with a milk in his lunchbox and someone offers him a soda, he's going to swap it out when no one's looking. If a kid doesn't want to wear a mask at school because barely anyone's wearing it, or it's hot or it's uncomfortable, they're not going to wear it because it's not mandated. You can't bake a cake without all of the ingredients. You can't stop the spread of this without all of these things in place. And that's not my opinion. That's scientific fact from every source we have. As far as the $1.7 million price tag that you put on our community and our children's welfare, even the president said that's not going to happen. And yeah, I understand Ducey put this thing in, whatever, his memorandum, his law that he's passing that is taking the board's power away, it's taking the people's power away to control their local communities. I'm not a lawyer, I don't know where it's going to go, but I can tell you that throughout our history, many atrocities have been legal, and it took people standing up to them and saying no for anything to change. On top of that, our school district contains protected classes of citizens at a very high rate under the 14th Amendment. We've heard a lot of people talking about freedom and a piece of cotton on their face, and we're infringing on their rights, but I can assure you that the majority of them do not fall under the protected class, because a protected class is a racial, ethnic, religious minority that does not exist in large enough groups to pass laws in their benefit. This law does not benefit children who can't be vaccinated, adults who can't be vaccinated, children from minority communities who the data shows are being impacted from COVID at much higher rates that we have a duty to protect. First and foremost, I mean, we swore an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution above all, regardless of what the governor says. My first loyalty is and always will be to the United States Constitution. And in Arizona, we have that this is an essential, can't find the word here, Basically, every child is entitled to a free and safe education, and we're not providing that. We're not. In-person learning is the most important thing. Every expert says so. Is it reasonable to think that we could skirt guidelines from the experts and still be able to maintain this? We're not very far into the year. It's just not reasonable. And the argument that kids aren't getting that sick, while it may be true right now, is rapidly changing and does not impact their families. Pima County is at an extremely high rate of transmission right now. It's the highest it can go. The CDC also measures social vulnerability, which combines a whole lot of things like social economic status, underlying health conditions, minority populations. A score of 0 is the least. A score of 1 is the highest vulnerability. And in our county, we are 0.8829. We are very high. To say that's happening just in Tucson or somewhere else, I think is very irresponsible. A majority of our community goes back and forth to Tucson every day for work and school. I agree with the parents who wrote in. I agree that we have been bending to a minority that has been robbed of the choice to make an accurate decision because of disinformation and people that are profiting from it. We, as a school, need to defend the same things that we teach our children, the same values we teach our children, the scientific method, to care about your neighbor, to love your neighbor as you would love yourself. Are we really doing that if we're putting people's families and lives in jeopardy? We're not. And we can't do our number one job of providing education to kids in a safe environment if we continue this way.
Thank you, Ms. Warner. Is there anybody else who has any thoughts or comments? I think it was very well said. As a parent of a couple of students in the district, and one who has immunocompromised situation, I would be remiss to not speak up and say that every possible layer of protection is appreciated and warranted. One of the write-ins, I think, was about a student who is undergoing cancer and having to deal with that. And protecting those around us is a duty for those who are healthy and hopefully can make decisions to support those around us, cheer each other on. How many of our employees have passed away from COVID?
We've had 3 employees since the start of the pandemic.
So 3 out of
860 approximately.
860. That's a very unfortunate thing to say, that there's even one, unfortunately, and one, just this past week. So having to explain to a student that their instructor has passed away from, a disease that probably could have been prevented had everybody helped and contributed in a manner, and rather than be quick to be laissez-faire, it's a shame, right? So those are kind of my thoughts. I don't know if anyone else has anything else. Okay.
It's not an open forum, I apologize.
I'm sorry, the opportunity for public comment has passed at this point.
Mr. President, if I may, just to clarify, just for the sake of understanding and hopefully communicating clarity, I understand the frustration, but just to clarify, a public school board meeting under Arizona law is a meeting of the board in public. And so the right of the public is to access to watch. Even the call to the public is not a legally obligated requirement. I'm glad that we do it. I think it does provide a voice. But I just wanted to clarify that it's not like a town hall and that kind of thing, just so that it doesn't create like there's an intentionality to exclude anybody. It's just kind of how the meeting is scheduled. So thank you, President Opalco.
Yeah. Thank you. So the other thing that's something to think about and consider is our duties as an employer under, OSHA and Arizona OSHA and occupational health, and knowingly sending employees into a potentially hazardous environment, I think is something that we need to consider. There are half of our population that are not eligible for vaccines. A quarter of them are now eligible under the FDA approved to get those. And I guess my question to you is, what is our legal authority to require vaccines for students?
For students?
Yes.
At this point, we haven't even pondered that. Honestly, my first reaction without researching it in depth is that it would be, at this particular point in time, it would be extremely challenging to mandate that, given where we are at this point in time in regards to the status of the vaccines, the age of our kids, et cetera. So I don't foresee that as being a strong likelihood in the foreseeable near future.
I do have a little bit of information on that.
My question really was, what is our legal stance on ability to require vaccines? I'm pretty sure that we're allowed to require them under Arizona law.
You mean for employees?
For students.
Mr. Opalco,
Yeah.
it is my understanding that those regulations are put forth by county and state health departments, not by individual
So
school
it's our
districts.
responsibility to adopt the policy into our
It's our-
policy.
Once it's given
Once
to
it's
us
given
to
by
us.
the county, and then
That's
it's our
what I was trying to
responsibility.
understand. I've had some people ask about that and understanding it, and I don't have that answer. That's why I'm trying to get to the answer, whether that is something that, is even, and it comes from somebody else. We
So
just
the specific question is what, Mr. Opalco?
So, as a board, we're not allowed to mandate vaccines, correct?
That is correct, as the best I
direction
understand.
comes from higher up at the
Yes.
Kingman County. Okay,
Yes,
that's what I was trying to
No,
get to.
thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and thank you for helping me get to that proper question, because there has been some, I think, misunderstanding about what our role and our expectations are and our abilities and what rights we have under Arizona revised statutes to implement policies and procedures and where that particular part falls within those rights.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to get that clarified because that has been asked. So, are there any other comments or questions?
I think it's really important to understand, I think we've all gotten emails from our community on both sides of this situation, and I think that the board is reflective of the community, and I think that we can model being respectful of different opinions, and it's really important that we have the ability to talk to each other up here without being interrupted. And so I appreciate the audience giving us the time to have an open conversation. And John, did you have anything to say, or should we just do we want to call for a motion? Did you want to make the motion, Nicole?
I couldn't really hear what you were saying. I'm sorry.
We don't have a motion on the table, correct?
That is correct.
What?
Correct. There are no motions on the table at this time. This was a discussion, and it's open for discussion. It's open for motions. It's open for et cetera. Right. So at this
Right.
point, there are no motions on the table. We've had the opinion from Dr. Valenzuela and his data points that various principals have provided to recommend or their opinions that staying the course is a certain situation. Nicole has presented information from various medical resources around their recommendations, as well as pointed out the CDC and Pima County Health Department and Arizona Department of Health Services recommendations as well. So at this point, we're just conducting conversation. There are no motions at this point.
I do have a question, and this is either for Dr. Valenzuela or any of the other board members or any of the other administration that might have answers, but with the indication that that a mask mandate would have to be gone, essentially, by September 29th, according to state law. Is there any indication as to implications of that if districts leave them in place? And is there any indication of what other school districts, local school districts, are doing with their mask mandates in terms of, is it just for the next month? Is it something they're planning on leaving in permanently? Is it something where, there's been threats, so to speak, flying from every possible direction towards schools, towards the governor, towards whatever. But is there any indication, I understand that there is a lawsuit pending as to whether or not the law as it was passed was legal in the first place, but is there any indication of an action plan beyond September 29th?
No, I think I know what you're saying. As we know, prior to the Superior Court ruling in Maricopa County, there were literally a handful of districts that chose to move forward with mandating masks, even with the understanding and the issue of the legality, the actual legality of the issue. I think once the Superior Court case basically gave that window of time for that period, we saw a number of districts that made that decision to mandate masks. I honestly don't have enough concrete information to say that specific motions were only until September 29th or how many of those would go beyond that. The only thing that I know to the best of my knowledge is that after September 29th, we have no current indication that this option will continue to be legal once the statute takes effect, unless some other court of proper jurisdiction intervenes between now and that, but I have nothing to believe that that's foreseeable. So really what we're talking about, from what we currently know, is the time frame between now and September 29th.
I can say that Vail, their numbers were high. They started to level off, and their board last night voted to continue to make mask optional.
And what's the plan? At what point do we reach the tipping point where we have, people out of class? I heard that there was a 92% attendance rate. Does that count those that are quarantined, or are those excluded from that percentage?
Mr. Bonner, you want to tackle that one?
That report was run over a week ago, and that accounted for kids that were not physically present in the school system. So kids that were quarantined were
considered absent.
Were disaggregated.
Okay. So they're considered absent.
Those are physically present students.
Okay, physically present students, or those who are part of SDPA and attending their class.
Yeah, SDPA. We separated those as well because they are full remote, and they're not really in that number count because they are not physically in a school setting. So the number count that we got were total absences in physical building locations. Okay. And I can tell you now that the number is going to change again. I would have to run a more accurate report because we've had more cases since that time. But at that point in time, it was at 92% physically
Mr.
attending
Bonner,
school.
could I just clarify? Because I think President Opalka's point is relevant, and I'd like to clarify it for myself. So, when you have a bunch of kids in class and somebody is a confirmed positive and you start drawing a 6-foot radius, you're going to have a number of kids go home. And I know it's been a tremendous amount of frustration. We've tried to make it better with test back and stuff. But my understanding is when those kids go home and they have to be there for at least 5 days until they test, and then 7 when they come back, those kids, as long as they are actively engaging in academic learning, and that's documented, they're allowed to be counted as present. Is that correct, Mr. Bonner?
Yes, that's the way we generated the plan, and that's how we submitted our instructional time model. So under the House bill that allows students to be marked as distance learning students, like are absent or present, we're able to have them excused not being physically located, but when I ran that report for my recall, it was students that were actually physically absent from the school setting. But the plan does allow us to have an excused absence for students that are either exposed to COVID under quarantine or are actually showing symptoms of COVID. It's an excused absence under a loud code called distance learning absent or distant learning present.
Thank you. And you know, I've heard stories of, you know, whole classes being quarantined. And so when you take two classes of, let's say 30 people in a class, 60 kids out of a school of 1,000, right? That number doesn't quite add up to, you know, so, and that's just two situations, not counting on any other, you know, contact tracing or anything like that. So I was curious how that actually worked out.
We have a number of students that are quarantined. There's no secret about that. I've talked to Amber about posting it up there. We just need to be up front. It's just the reality. And to your point, Mr. Opaka, I think you really ask an important, kind of thoughtful, underpinning question, which is, what kind of tipping points, what kind of indicators are there? I think the unfortunate part of this thing is that it is contextual. You know, I think Ms. Reese or Ms. Lowell talked about other districts and what they're doing. You know, every district is unique in its demographic, in its community values, in its disease numbers, all of that. I would say that, again, I started my comments with, at this point in time, this is the broad stroke consideration of what we know about disease numbers, about the unique management of the situation, the number of cases in our place, our ability to manage what we're dealing with. And I think as we found over this thing is that we do need to always be ready to pivot and to use whatever tools we have available to us to help support the mission. My comments of just observation for your consideration are based on my reflection and careful thought at this particular point in time, and that they could change, and I think we always have to be accepting that that's always a possibility in this world we live in today.
Thank you. And there are some other things to consider. You know, last year when we had rates that were at these numbers, there were recommendations on percent positivity, community spread, those kind of things. Have those gone by the wayside at this point?
You know, that's a really good question of whether they formally have gone by the wayside. I can tell you, I guess it's an anecdote, that I used to look at those every day, and I haven't seen them as prominently displayed on my computer screen in the course of recent history. I haven't seen them as prominently in the limelight.
Okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to add this comment from our president, and it's not just some snapshot from Twitter. It's his official memorandum issued August 18th on ensuring a safe return to in-person learning. And he directly addressed, and I quote, "At the same time, however, some state governments have adopted policies and laws that interfere with the ability of schools and districts to keep our children safe during in-person learning. Some of these policies and laws have gone so far as to try and block school officials from adopting safety protocols aligned with the recommendations from the CDC to protect students, educators, and staff. And some state officials have even threatened to impose personal financial consequences on school officials who are working tirelessly to put student health and safety first and to comply with their legal obligations to their communities to further the essential goal of a safe in-person education for all students. Our priority must be the safety of students, families, educators, and staff in our school communities. Nothing should interfere with this goal." So I would like to just say, I know it will take more time, but that's the case when anything is done with the utmost fidelity. I know that there is a law coming up that will be active on the 29th of September. I also know that it's very conflicting because if we're not able to keep students in school, then their parents can be offered vouchers to take them elsewhere anyway, and how can we keep them in school if any of these experts are right, along with all the other ones I didn't print out? So if all these people are wrong, and if I'm wrong, the worst thing that will happen is like people are wearing a mask. But if we make the wrong choice, the worst thing that will happen is that these predictions are correct, and because the virus has mutated to affect the people that are still not dead or vaccinated, our kids and our community are going to be the ones that will suffer. And I would like to make a motion to put an immediate mask mandate back in our schools.
Thank you very much. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I have any other discussion?
Mr. President, I move to amend the motion to state mask mandate indoors with optional outside.
Okay. I have
You need a second.
a motion for that amendment.
Second.
Right, I have a second for that. Are there any further discussions?
Just want to make sure I understand. So that motion was that masks will be mandated immediately inside.
Correct.
Is that what I understood?
Yes.
Does that include hallways?
You
Yes,
need
that-
to place
that's-
inside is
yeah, that-
was my intention on it.
Correct. The first motion was to have a mandatory mask mandate. The second was to amend it for interior use mandatory and optional outside. So the current motion on the floor is to mandate mask use indoors and optionally outdoors, effective immediately. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
So would you roll call that, because I can't tell who said what?
Yep, we'll do a roll call vote. Dr. Sparks, aye or nay?
Nay.
Ms. Lowell, aye or nay?
Nay.
Ms. Reese, aye or nay?
Nay.
Ms. Warner, aye or nay?
Obviously, aye.
And Kevin Opalka, aye. So
no longer have
the
a
motion
majority.
fails to pass 3-2. We will move on to item number 11, the consent agenda. Dr. Valenzuela.
Yes, Mr. President Opalka, you have a lengthy list of items that are routine consent in nature and may be considered in one motion at a time. And at this point, I do recommend the approval of the consent agenda in its entirety as presented.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have, or sorry, I have a recommendation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? The same. Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to possible future agenda considerations. Are there any items for consideration in the future? Nope. Okay. Thank you. We'll establish the next board meeting, which will be September 15th here at the district auditorium. There's no executive session. Do I have a motion for recess?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you very much.